in terms of performance. There is a gap occurring between those that are brave and embrace this new world and those that don't, are kind of falling behind already. And that's in a matter of years and months. That's terrifying levels of change. And I think this change imperative is here, that there is a need now to say, it's okay, let's embrace it. Let's face it full on. And I know as an organization, you have been leading at the front of kind of agentic AI and AI adoption. And I think there are still occasionally people that say, hey, it won't change everything too much. But in reality, everything is going to be different. AI is only as good as the consistency and the quality of the data it can access. If it's not accessing great data, it's none of those things. So you need to get the data sources right. What is the strategy to connect that data and to identify new data sources that we need on top of that? What are the metrics we're going to measure on the business? And I think they are completely changing. I do think now is the time that marketing can be held accountable for revenue, because I think revenue growth, they will be the only bellwethers of metrics in the future. What is the ultimate revenue impact on this, and what is the customer value to us? Because we have to learn to embrace that new buyer behavior and then keep those people, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest in the award-winning OnBase podcast series. I'm your host, Paul Gibson, and we always look for different hot topics to discuss. So I'm really excited. Today, I'm talking with Fiona Shepherd. You may well know her as founder and CEO of April 6, and also now a key figure within the Marketbridge organization. You're with us today to talk about a great topic, I think, marketing's next move, the change imperative for 2026. So Fiona, it sounds like a great topic. I'm excited to get into this with you. So thanks very much for coming on the show.
That's wonderful. Well, I feel very honored. Thank you very much. I feel very special to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And as we always do, before we get into the topic, it'd be really good, Fiona, if you don't mind, just start with a simple question. Just take us through your journey to where you are today and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, no, of course, absolutely. And, I have to start by saying I feel incredibly lucky every day because my career journey has been just one exciting, challenging, very important part of my life. And, and luck has played a big part in that. And some astonishing people have played a big part in that. What's probably also worth mentioning is I can't remember much before I started April 6, because that was 25 years ago, I was obviously really, really young then. And so 25 years in one place has kind of meant that that's all I can remember. But I know I did a bit of client side before that and those sorts of things in marketing, but it has been a 25-year journey with April 6. And the reason I feel lucky is that every year has been a different year. And I think that's astonishing, right? If you could honestly say that no year was the same, then you're a very lucky person. And I think it's changed in so many ways. I think, that has been embracing new services. If I'm really honest, I actually started in the world of printed direct marketing, if anybody remembers that. And so, we've gone full circle, really. So I was very targeted, insightful, direct mail to about 25 million people at a time. So having started right in direct marketing, all of those trends in services, I've been lucky to be able to embrace, move forward, almost always with brand and demand at the center. But the journey has taken me through so many changes in services. And then I think locations, I have been, on this joyous path with all these talented people, having started in London and then ending up with 4 or 5 offices here, but equally opening in America 12 or 13 years ago, which is now an extraordinarily successful agency, then going to another continent and China and Singapore and then Germany here. So the challenges have been about services, but they've also been about locations and exploring working in different parts of the world. China was definitely a learning for me. And I think, that all builds you as a leader, as a person, as a business person. And the innovation changes when you think about over that 25 years have been extraordinary. So yeah, I'd say I'm lucky. I think I'm built to create change. I love change. So maybe that's why every year is different. I start it and go, heck, I want to do something new this year. What will it be? I'm probably very wearing to work with. And I'm really lucky to have had lots of the same people by my side for most of those 25 years, which is incredible. And And that's kind of why you talk to being part of Marketbridge now. That is part of that change, that kind of next generation, that next iteration. Where is the market going? How is the market changing? So that's a really exciting time, really. So yeah, it's been an incredible career, and now building Marketbridge in EMEA, which is a very exciting job to be taking on.
Yeah, it's an exciting journey, and obviously sounds like a lot of fun, and that's the key to it, right? You obviously
I,
enjoy it, and you've
I
obviously always enjoyed it, so
you know,
that's really good.
I enjoy the change, and the change is not just in where you are; it's in what you're selling. But I also think we have incredibly talented people in the B2B space, and it's just inspirational to be around clients. How lucky are we that we work with people that inspire us and make us want to take a bold step forward, and I think that's been a big part of why I've loved this career so much.
Yeah, absolutely, and we might touch on it a bit during our session today. But B2B always used to look at B2C and say, how do we copy them? And now we've grown up and realize actually we need to do things differently, but we can also do things that are really clever. So yeah, it's
Well,
nice to
yeah,
see how.
I think we found our value. I think we suddenly realized that actually we are, and it's one of my pet things really. We are not a cost center, we're a profit center. Marketing is a profit center. It drives revenue, reputation, brand. It is not a cost to a business. It is the very center and core of how a business operates. And I think we finally found our voice, which is never a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember doing a talk a while ago, and it's cut waste, not resources, because for some of the marketing teams that are heart of every business, when numbers seem to be getting under pressure, it's, oh, let's cut this, cut that. They shouldn't be cutting resources or headcount
Yeah.
or
Well,
budgets.
and I
They should
think
be
now,
cutting more.
particularly in fairly turbulent economic times, nobody's saying this is an easy time. You still feel that trend towards cutting costs, and then marketing is one of the first costs to be cut. But it's at the very lifeblood of an organization, and kind of is because it's always seen as a cost, it's cut rather than actually reinvesting. And there's so much research that says the more you invest in marketing in some of these tricky times or in times of change, which we are in again, then the more you get in return. So kind of I'm always on that hobby horse of actually we're a profit center for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree with that. So looking back, was there anything in particular that inspired you to focus on like the priorities for marketing leaders as we approach 2026? And I think what you call the change imperative?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you see the whole world pivoting. Everything is changing, right? It does feel a little like the world is upside down. And, I was reading something a couple of nights ago, and it was doing the comparison to, this is like the Industrial Revolution and then the introduction of the web. I'd like to point out I wasn't here for the Industrial Revolution. I probably did just touch the beginning of the web. Um, but ultimately, there is this seismic change happening in our sector. And I think it takes bravery now to kind of move forward and embrace it. And, there was some other research that was in a presentation I sat in a couple of days ago that was showing the difference in organizations' performance if they've adopted AI. So actually, in terms of performance, there is a gap occurring between those that are brave and embrace this new world and those that don't are kind of falling behind already. And that's in a matter of years and months, right? That's terrifying levels of change. And I think this change imperative is here. There is a need now to say it's okay, let's embrace it. Let's face it full on. And I know as an organization, you have been leading at the front of kind of agentic AI and AI adoption. And I think, there are still occasionally people that say, hey, it won't change everything too much. But in reality, everything is going to be different. And we've already worked out that I find that exciting, which is slightly probably worrying. But I think it's exciting that things are going to change that much. But I understand at every level of an organization that causes some level of restlessness and concern, and it is our responsibility to help organizations move forward through that. And I think one of the reasons that I think being part of Marketbridge is important to me is that they focus on growth, so they reinvent growth. And I think we're at a point where all of these changes are about reinventing growth. They are about reinventing how we go to market. The way that people use your product will never be the same again. And that's extraordinary, right?
Right.
I think it's exciting. Some people say it's scary. I think it probably should be both. But I think that's where this kind of imperative comes from, this need to say, yes, but we actually now do need to make a real shift. So let's be pragmatic about how we do that as business leaders. So I'm not as down in the granular. So there are some really technical people doing some really technical things. I'm kind of trying to help customers and businesses and our business kind of embrace it and move on to that next step. And I think that's where I see the imperative. You can take it all the way down to how do we structure our data so we can make the most of this. You can get very granular on it. I'm kind of a little evangelical about let's make that move full stop and let's do that together. And let's, you know, have running a big agency and having done so for so long, what is the partnership between us and the client now? And then with platforms like yours, how are we all going to work together? Because we all need each other to take a step on this scale. We need to become a collaboration. And I think that's what I'm striving to do, is make sure we have that collaboration. Because if you make this kind of technology change, it's so much more than that. It's about transforming your business. And then you layer on top of that the fact that none of our buyers buy in the same way anymore. So it didn't just change how we do something and how we deliver a service or how we make something creative. It actually means that the people we're trying to talk to are doing things entirely differently too. And you go, wow, so what is the consistent theme here? And they're not. Everything is being rewritten. And sometimes that sounds dramatic, although I was actually listening to the godfather of AI talking about what a terrible thing he'd created. And I'm now terrified as well. I've managed to scare myself a little bit. But actually, it sometimes when you go, what if everything is up for grabs? What if we're reinventing and we're changing and we're making decisions about the organizations and the businesses we want to be going forward? And how are we going to do that? That's when I think you can truly put the word change imperative on this and say, this is the moment in time when we have to do things differently. And if we don't, the buyer is going somewhere different anyway. And I know you're leading with those sorts of solutions to help people to stay ahead of that intent and that changed behavior. But that is scary for people, right? I think it's fun to rewrite the rules, but it's also scary in the same breath.
Absolutely, and all of these newfangled things that come along, it's always a little bit scary. I think if people can enhance and understand that a lot of this stuff that's coming out, all these agentic AI things are coming up, they take away all of the manual, time-consuming, boring tasks that you have to do that take you away from what you want to do, which is marketing, sales, that sort of stuff, and it allows you to have the time to do that. I think that's when people can start getting excited about it.
Oh,
I don't have to fill out a form. I don't have to build a spreadsheet. I don't have to explore all the data. AI can do all that for me. And then it's how do I use my creative mindset to utilize that insight? So,
yeah. And I think it is not about making humans irrelevant. It
absolutely not.
never was. It was about making humans more valuable because they could add the value to the mundane tasks being done by the machine. So
Right.
I think it is transformational and it does mean a change for everybody, but it means we can do more of what we want to do. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But there are risks, like all things. We are trusting a machine to do all of that mundane stuff, which is lovely. With agentic, we're kind of trusting it to do more of that and to connect it and to start within boundaries, making decisions and moving it. So taking on tasks rather than just a singular task. And that starts to bring up all new sorts of topics around, how safe is that and how does the human intervention play into that? Where do we make sure the human is, and I think the key point is the human is still in control, right? How does the human stay in control? I think that's a thread across everything AI, but how does the human stay in control of that? And how do we make sure we're compliant and we're behaving ethically in that environment. So I think there were just lots of checks and balances. And I think that's what makes it exciting in the same way. And I think, you're helping your organization is a part of this, but we've spent our whole life. I was part of inventing the first ever funnel and all that sort of thing, and the waterfall and all those sorts of things. And I think we now look at a world where it's not about the next version of the waterfall or the funnel, but that is a customer led, flatter experience. So therefore, we have to rewrite it, and potentially it's not a funnel, right?
Yeah.
It's not shaped like a funnel. It's kind of customer led. Therefore, even if I watch my own personal buying habits, they are entirely changed. And so the impacts of that are significant. They're significant in your MarTech, they're significant in your kind of creating demand, they're significant in you converting demand. So all of those things are affected by that. And that, that's here. It's not a case of do we want it or don't we? I think we might have gone past the point of being able to decide whether this was the way we were going or not going.
Yeah.
Unless you know something I don't, but I think
Yeah,
it's,
I can't possibly comment. No, no, absolutely. I definitely think that it's here to stay. And it's an interesting point actually. Maybe we can dig into this a little bit more because AI is obviously top of mind and it's the centerpiece of most conversations we have, and this one here today. In your mind, based on your experience, how do you see agentic AI reshaping marketing? Or is it automation? Is it autonomy? Is it a combination of everything?
yeah, I think it's all of those things. And I think, it's really early adopters that are kind of mapping this into their organization now. And I think you've got to be really sensible and make sure that when you're either deploying the agentic solutions that are built into some of that tech stack you have already, and in which case they're well thought through, they're well managed. You've just got to make sure that you've put your guardrails on it and that you know how you're managing that process as it's happening so that you're keeping some safety on it. So I think that matters in that way. I think when you start to think about your own organization and look inwards and say, now, how do I want to embed agentic in tasks that are unique to my organization? That's got to be done really carefully. And I was sad enough listening to a podcast last night on EU regulation around AI because it's beginning to become a problem because ultimately the EU regulations kicked in this year, and in theory, a lot of the new updated versions or new tools will not be allowed to be used in Europe because they're just not secure enough. And the problem in that is it's going to hold those businesses back in Europe if we can't, and from a workforce perspective, all sorts of things. So there are lots of implications that a business has to consider. And when it's considering how to use agentic in its organization, it's got to make sure that use case can be managed by a human. So the mundane tasks are being done and automated agentically, but that there is human checks and balances on that. I think, as you're building them into your own business and they haven't had all of that rigor put into them by the kind of solution, you need to make sure that you've got your guardrails, that you know how and when you're going to spot it, if there's any hallucination or if there's any potential threat from a security perspective. There were lots of new threats coming into play now, which are sending, invites or whatever into and entering organizations through the AI tools. And you kind of go, wow, that does take a little bit more thought now. So I think agentic is, and I saw some Microsoft work, which talks about, the AI we have now, which is AI plus human, which is you and I using it to make our day a bit easier, to be able to find things easier, to look smarter, all those sorts of things. That's why I'm using it anyway when I can. We're all using it like that. Then you get your AI plus agentic. So you've got some tasks being done by the agentic solution and the human is overseeing that, and you're putting in some measures that allow them to know how to spot if it's not behaving the way you expect it to, even maybe to modify and kind of improve that as you move forward. And then the next phase of that, which is a human managing multiple agents. So you end up with this human plus a sim-based tool. You've got your agents, and they are kind of doing a lot of the tasks. And I think you started here. I think it's where you started it all, which was they're doing the tasks that human doesn't necessarily need to do. They're not adding the value. They're potentially not able to do it as well as the agentic solution can because of the speed and the width of its ability to work. And then you get to this point somewhere, I'd like to say years ahead, but I think the speed we're going, it might not be years ahead, where, you're employing people to manage a number of agents, and those agents are undertaking the majority of the tasks that either are mundane or that require a lot of repetitive data analysis to get to a point, or actually kind of analyzing and acting on that data in one. So I think the workforce of the future might be quite different, and an organization will undoubtedly have a lot of its day-to-day work done by agents. I can't see a way that doesn't happen unless what are you thinking?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one, I think I've heard several conversations I've had where people are saying AI agents will be built in technology to buy from AI agents in other technology. The middleman. You don't need salespeople anymore. I'm not sure it'll ever get there, but I think that the other one that I hear quite a lot is AI driving people to do things without any insight. So it's like the brilliant example. I was talking to a sales leader yesterday that they've started ignoring the intent signals they were getting from a particular platform because it was saying, go after that company. No insight on the reasoning behind it, nothing
Yep.
to do with the buying. Are they engaging with the brand? It's just go after it. And so, of course, SDRs and salespeople got excited and they started going after it. And at least 50% of the time, it was just wild goose chases. It wasn't relevant. And so I termed it AI without the why. AI can be
I like
great, but if you don't understand why AI is telling you to do it, as a salesperson, how do you know what messaging? How do you know when to engage them? So I think that's something that, AI, fantastic. Let's all use it and adopt it, but don't just blindly believe this black box signal without having the insight behind it. So I think there's some interesting stuff out there, but as long as they don't go, well, let's just use technology to buy from other technology and cut out the middleman, because otherwise I'll be looking for a new job. But
Yeah, no,
yeah.
yeah, I think that plays well there, doesn't it? Into the thing that starts to build now, which is the lack of trust in it. In that ultimately you go through a whole cycle, don't you? When there's a change on this scale, and it's a societal change, it literally is going to change how people buy things at home and interact at home and book their next holiday, whatever. It's going to change all of society, AI, in that way. Then actually that God, I can't remember the point I was going to make now, so we'll have to do that. What were we saying?
Oh, we were just talking about the AI buying from AI and
Yeah, I was going to go on I was going to talk about the authenticity point there, because I think it is scary. I think people start to look for some sort of human confirmation that it's okay. And I think that's really exciting, because I think you then get to a point where it needs the human to be kind of real. The other change that I think is happening is that how long have we talked about the alignment of sales and marketing? Just forever and ever and ever. Um, and we've said these two things have to be seen as one. They have to work as one. In some ways, the kind of creation of the growth officer on the board was a sort of the first real step towards saying these two things should work in harmony.
yeah.
But AI and the use of AI and agentic AI is going to mean they have to work totally in sync. Going back to the example you just gave, right? They have to be working hand in hand. You possibly, I mean, you're talking about, the death of the salesman there, that very famous book we all studied at school, where you're talking about death of a salesman. They probably need to restructure their organization to make sure they've got the right people able to deliver the right part of this new hybrid human and AI answer. And again, one of the reasons that the Marketbridge solution for me was the right place to be, the Marketbridge platform, is that they do the whole go-to-market consulting, organizational change, all of those sorts of things. And I think you really probably need to think about transforming your entire organization. And that is going to mean you need to rethink how sales and marketing are aligned, how how they work together in harmony, hand in hand, to actually make the most of the efficiencies and the productivity and the advantage this brings. Because you're right, actually, that isn't the death of sales, it's the reinvention of sales, because there is so much of that sales relationship that the AI can't do.
Yeah.
So much of it. Your sparkling personality, all of those things, the trust that your clients have in you as an organization, that cannot be replaced. And I think it will probably pivot to become exponentially more important,
Yeah.
because they know that everything they're being fed is being fed them by the machine, and that they're kind of like going on a journey hand in hand. What was the figure I saw yesterday? Something like 78% of the buying decision is done independent of a vendor anymore. They're doing all of that, and they know they're doing it with AI, because it's some ridiculous amount, like over 50% of people stop at the agentic AI point now. So when the AI tells them in the search, when they get to the generative AI answer, they stop and they read down that answer, and then they go off and make a decision. So much of what they're doing is outside of our traditional funnel, that actually in many ways you need to rewrite that funnel entirely and say, what is an MQL anymore? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know anymore. What is an SQL? Surely that's not, that can't be true. That can't be true. And so everything is going to need to be rewritten, and potentially your organization is going to restructure, and the way you align those two, they are jointly using the advantages of product. Solutions like yours are sales and marketing solutions. They always have been,
Yeah.
but they
Absolutely.
predominantly live in marketing. But mostly they should be shared across all of that, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we are obviously seen primarily as a marketing
Mm.
platform ourselves, but when you look at our data, we've got more salespeople using us than marketers. And
Yeah,
the
you would
real, the
do.
really, the really interesting thing is that you speak to a sales leader and say, "Well, why am I interested in this stuff?" Well, you told us your close rates are down. You told us it's taking you longer to close deals, and your churn rates are going up. That is quite simply because the stuff that's going into your pipeline isn't the stuff that your sales team can close. So if we can
Yeah.
help you align with marketing so you're all going after accounts that you know your business can and wants to sell to,
Yes.
guess what? Your close rates will go up, your average order value will go up, and more importantly, they're good, valuable customers, so your renewal rates will go up. So of course it's relevant to sales. And I think once you have that discussion, people start to understand it a bit more.
Yeah, I think so. And it's getting so much smarter and then we go to buyer groups, and we go to all of those fundamental changes in the way that we see intent and use intent and manage intent. And you kind of go, that is a very relevant sales and marketing conversation. It is important. What is the point? As you say, I think the example you gave earlier talks exactly to this. What is the point if that is not actionable insight? If there isn't something that makes sales more able to convert at that point, more able, and, as all clients are running, all their intent and agentic tools, a lot of people are going to be in the same place at the same time if they all know what's right. So you've got to have an edge, and that edge comes from how you're using that insight. That edge comes from how you show up creatively, how you show up from a brand perspective. You've got an even shorter, we used to have all that time when they had 7 touches before they became a marketing qualified or a sales qualified lead. And you'd had all this time to tell people your perspective on things, to talk, to coach people into your points of differentiation. You potentially are coming in the last 15 or 20% of the sale now, right? That you're past that point of, let me kind of educate you. So you've got to do 2 things. One is you've got to go and educate somewhere else. Make sure that you are in that 80% of the search that's happening outside of the traditional funnel. Make sure you're there. And that means you've got to look at generative AI. And that's blowing everybody's mind, right? We've got a number of geo solutions going in now, but ultimately clients are watching their inbound disappear off the edge of a cliff, right? It's just going, because nobody is getting to the paid search bit anymore. And in fact, I watched myself do it the other day, which is really ridiculous. I wanted to find something out, and I got so obsessed with the generative answer that I didn't go anywhere else. And I thought, cool, I do that too. I get to the generative answer and it tells me what I need to know. And then it tells me some other interesting things. And then I kind of get a bit wrapped up in that. And then I look at the citation to make sure I'm not doing anything wrong and all of that sort of thing. And you kind of go, wow, that is, organizations have got to really make sure they're thinking about buyer interaction in an entirely different way, that they are thinking about how do I get into that Gen AI, that independent search. And that's, the content for that is predominantly Reddit and YouTube. And, you go, I didn't get many briefs for that in the last 25 years. Can you get me on Reddit, please? And it's also about kind of third party authentication and trusted sources. We know the Gen AI is in the search of truth, allegedly. So it is searching for things it feels are trustworthy and confident in. So now you get the resurgence of the Gartners and the Foresters and all that sort of thing because actually they're trusted. And so the AI will go listen to some of those more trusted resources. And so, I'm getting asked to, publish league tables again and to do things. It's kind of crazy, really, but we've got to pivot and be in that 80%. And then you'll be watching that as a tool and tools will be watching that. And then make sure that when they're ready in that last bit of the sale, sometimes that we are the ones that are there and then that we have the biggest impact and say the most relevant thing. And we've got one chance to say it. We haven't got 7 touches. We've got one chance.
Yeah,
So it's the
absolutely.
rebirth of brilliant creativity comes back into its own again. That's very cool. It's not about how many versions can I do. It's about what one single thing can I say at this point to be the chosen solution. And that's exciting again.
Absolutely. I think the rise of intent and things like that, a big part of that was COVID. As horrible as COVID
I
was,
know, true.
it identified there's no trade shows, there's no field events, there's no face-to-face meetings. How the heck do we get opportunities? Oh, we'll cross our fingers and hope that someone comes to our website.
Yeah.
Well, then, so how do you find them? And then intent obviously had a massive resurgence, and I think that's driven a lot. So, yeah, it's exciting to see where things go, and something that's often brushed under the carpet, and it's slightly changing the topic a little bit. But data alignment, it's seen as a stumbling block to many people. So, how do you think marketing leaders should better connect people, processes, metrics to turn some of that raw data into actionable insights?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the big opportunity now, isn't it? And I think we are being brought in more and more to kind of create that data landscape and to build out the KPIs, because I think ultimately you probably have to rewrite your metrics as well, right? So this is probably a time that you want to say, we're not going to measure things in the same way. We can't measure things in the same way. We've got to have our metric, intent changes how you deliver metrics. So I think all of that is truly the foundation for what we're going to achieve, and none of it is answered yet. I think we're in the early adopter stage there, where we are actually working with clients to find a way to connect all those data sources, because AI is only as good as the consistency and the quality of the data it can access. If it's not accessing great data, it's none of those things. So you need to get the data sources right. You've also got all the legislation to watch at the same time. In Europe, that's slightly less funny than everywhere else in the world, but in Europe, it's kind of legislation becomes a big thing here as well. And so you've got to make sure that works. I get that you've got to make sure that your data is sorted, but then I think, I think those clients that are adopting early, we're working with them on these kind of strategies, which is what is the strategy to connect that data and to identify new data sources that we need on top of that. So that is one thing. But then the second thing becomes, what are the metrics we're going to measure on the business? And I think they are completely changing. I can remember years and years ago, I won a big contract with a massive technology company, and it was on a risk and reward basis, which was terrifying. I actually lost weight for the first time 2 years running because it was so scary. But ultimately, it measured us on MQL and then MQL to SQL. It was very traditional. And then it stopped at SQL if it went to the channel because we couldn't measure it and all that. So it was very complicated and very stressful. Those things are not going to be the measures of a successful business tomorrow. They are going to be total customer value, total life cycle value, they're going to be. I was reading some research yesterday that talked about how AI is directly impacting the time to conversion. So literally organizations that were taking 6 months to convert are seeing that come drop and drop. Now, I think that's because people are coming in later in the buyer cycle.
Yeah.
But if the organization is only got, instead of having a 6 month sales cycle, it's got a 2 month sales cycle, you want to change all of your metrics, right? Everything is up for grabs. And I think that's where you'll start to see now is where is the new measurement coming from? And buyer groups help with that and all of that. So you might measure it distinctly in marketing around, using the power of the buyer group to drive additional kind of impact on revenue. And I think, I do think now is the time that marketing can be held accountable for revenue, because I think revenue growth, they will be the only bellwethers of metrics in the future. I think, there are other things that are nice to haves and they might get put there in measurement, but, I'm fairly sure a lot of the metrics will spin around what is the ultimate revenue impact on this and what is the customer value to us, because we have to learn to embrace that new buyer behavior and then keep those people, right? Because that's the next thing is that buyer life cycle. So I think all of those are being adopted. I think people understand they are critical to the success of an AI embedded or an AI enabled in organization. And I think we'll see those starting to shape up now, but data will be as it always was, right? I think it was when I started in direct marketing. It was my problem 25 years ago. It is still the problem today, and the scale and size of it is immense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we speak to lots of people who just want to buy data. Well, you don't just want to buy a load of data. You want to buy the data that's relevant to you and the insight you're seeing and things. So I think there's lots of interesting discussions around that is
Yeah.
still coming in. And metrics, you touched on metrics. It's amazing how many B2B companies we talk to every day who are still relying on, I call them false positives, like a click-through rate, anonymous click-through rate, anonymous website traffic. At the end of the day, if I'm sending out an advertising campaign and I can only sell to banks and financial institutions, and I get French Connection clicking on my ad, yes, it's a click on my ad, but it's not someone that we can ever buy to. So is that a positive? I don't think so. Then they go to your website. Great, our website traffic's gone up, but it's not someone you can sell to. And worst case, it goes into the pipeline. Sales go around chasing it with very little chance of closing it because it doesn't fit. So all of those are false positives. But then,
Yeah.
of course, the last piece in that puzzle is if you've got a really good or potentially really bad salesperson that closes French Connection, great, but they're passing the post-sales team a disaster because it doesn't fit. They'll never get to value and they'll churn. So that actually loses money to the business. So I think, as I say, and you probably see it as well, but it amazes me that so many B2Bs are still using these outdated,
Insane.
anonymous click-through rate type metrics.
I did have a strategy that is ultimately, with all the intent knowledge we now have, thanks to solutions like yours, ultimately we really know what products should be sold. If we're a portfolio solution, from that intent, we know that if we're pointing it to sales and sales should be selling them, product A, that's the right solution for them. It's the one that suits their business. The profile is right. If they sell them product B because that is the product they know and love and which happens a lot, then ultimately there is no commission. So I had this idea that we should actually, going back to what are your measurements, maybe in the future we can create measurements that are about, did you sell the right thing to the right person? And then did we make sure that they could use that solution to its optimum so that we retain them? So it gives you this exciting future where potentially it is all about the customer. Every metric we have is about the customer. And that would be the right way up for the world, really, I think.
Yeah. And again, I have lots of discussions around don't think about how much this costs, think about how much value it delivers to your business. So in a similar way, how much value did you deliver to that customer when you sold them that particular product or whatever? Yeah, it's interesting. Lots of change coming. Another thing, we speak to lots of business leaders and a lot of them get frustrated that they might have bought a piece of technology that pretty much straight jackets them and haven't got the ability to evolve. Their journeys are changing, but they can't change with it and things like that. So as customer journeys become more fragmented, as we're saying, and we're probably seeing them influenced more and more by these generative AIs.
Oh
How
man.
do you see marketing teams adapting to ensure that they can maintain the relevant visibility and engagement?
I mean, I think, you know, the sudden realization that generative, that geo is here and geo has instantly changed buyer behaviors is causing teams to pivot quite quickly. It's one of the most rapid changes in behavior I think I've seen in a long time. And so I think, you know, you see organizations, I think there might be Gartner work out yesterday that said that 60% of searches are now satisfied by the Gen AI, right? That is immense. That is crazy. Um, and it's almost underselling it to say it's the new search, because I don't think it is the replacement for SEO. I think SEO is just going away. I think SEO is going and geo is coming.
Mm.
Geo is not it's so much more than search, right? And it's only in its first iterations, really. So you kind of wonder where Gen 3 and 4 might be, because actually, as it is now, to have already converted 60% of people to not actually engaging with the search is insane, right? That's just madness over time. And then there was some Forrester research out last week, I think, or the week before, that talked about 89% of B2B buyers had used generative AI in their procurement process. And again, you kind of go, wow, I don't remember it being a big thing last year. I don't
Mm.
remember many people saying, if you want to, I'm going to say to my kids, please learn how to do that, because I think that's probably a very good place to be. So I think that's going to change both agencies and clients, right? We are both sides of the fence going to need to pivot around those kinds of changes, because that's the fragmentation. You combine AI with the customer led behaviors we have now, you have complete fragmentation, right? Because we don't know where they're going or what they're doing. We kind of hope we can guess where they'll go next. And that's where your buyer groups become really important, because we can go, well, look, it looks like that you've got you're much more likely, if you're embedding buyer groups and intent, to be able to manage in that fragmented world. But ultimately, for most organizations, this is a scary moment when suddenly they have no idea where the customer is going and how they're going to behave. And that's where it takes that kind of flattens this funnel and makes it into this kind of customer led madness journey, which they are dictating, and we will see patterns and you will see patterns, which will enable us to kind of match over them. But it does mean that now, I've got some things that I'm doing, for Marketbridge as an organization. And I was kind of saying to the team as we're planning them, there's some events and things like that. And I'm going, can you make sure all the content is Gen AI friendly? And you kind of go, when did I add that? That's in my briefing process now. And you kind of go, wow. So we all have to pivot, right? The clients are going to have to pivot to understand that actually, to influence their buyers, they have to think about the new way in which a customer led journey plays out and how they become relevant in there. As agencies, we need to make sure we're helping clients to build those Gen AI strategies, and then that we are able to come behind tools like yours and really excel at creativity. So actually, this new level of creativity, which is, I guess, one shot creativity. You've got to accept you are not potentially going to have lots of times that you can be there. So I think, this is where I think we talked earlier on, didn't we, about it feels a little bit like it's restless, our industry. There's this restlessness. That is because every client is now behaving differently. So client behavior has changed. Our roles have changed. The technology capability has changed. And you kind of go, that is going to take a complete shift in potentially over the next few years in organizational structure, definitely in metrics and direction. And ultimately, there is going to need to be, some real focus on the technology that helps you embrace that, which is why I guess you're glad you work where you work too. Because actually, you kind of go, some of us were lucky enough to be in a place that probably embraces this wave of chaos that's coming, that actually beyond that is a kind of more normal situation. But I think at the moment it feels slightly chaotic. But I think, I talk to some clients sometimes, and they are already creating plans for agentic deployment within their organizations. And you kind of go, that there's these real frontiers. I think Microsoft used the words AI frontiers. They're at the front, they're leading, and they're big organizations. We have to make sure every organization can deal with this level of change and embrace it. So I think everything will change. We'll rewrite the funnel. We'll rewrite our job descriptions, all of those things. And I think that will be fun. But we're going to feel like we have less control for a minute because of the buyer-led journey in AI. But actually, we just need to take control of where we are. I think it's really simple. And I think we just need to understand and simplify the situation and then take steps forward, because I think it feels hard sometimes to kind of go, where do I focus those energies? What do I do first? And I think, as organizations, we are there to help our clients do that as they step forward, to be by their side, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something, the immediacy of everything. Social
It's
media
like, what?
has changed the whole world, right? I don't want 5 touches to make a decision. I want boom, done, out of the way. And you're right, we have to go with that. Otherwise we're gonna
Yeah,
get
well, we're
left
kind
behind.
of going, hey, we wanted to share our opinion. We wanted you to take our little like online ready record. None of that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you kind of go, oh, that's fun, really fun.
Yeah. And I think it is exciting. We're in a space that's constantly changing. I think it'd be very boring if you did the same thing all day, every day for as long as we've been
Oh
working.
my
So I
God.
think it's good that we have that constant change. But you brought up a good point, actually. So, this is here and now, and it's only going to be around more and get more embedded in things. So, from your experience, what do you think the critical challenges businesses will face when they're trying to operationalize AI and maybe integrate it in with their other strategies?
Oh, the fundamental one here for me is that they've got to take their people on this journey, right? And I think one of the biggest things about the EU legislation, and I hate legislation, I don't like reading it. I make it sound like I like reading legislation. I don't. Is that you have to AI enable your entire organization. So they are quite clear about the fact that you have a responsibility as an organization to empower and retrain all your staff in what this means. And for different roles and different responsibilities, that's going to mean different things. And a generation will leave school in 5 years' time that we don't need to educate on AI, because it's going to tell us a thing or two. But ultimately, at the moment, it is our biggest responsibility is to make sure we restructure and retrain, and that we do that quickly so that people don't feel afraid in this new world and don't feel held back. And so I think, this is an exciting time in terms of training and development, because you've got to build that into your organization. I was thinking, we're just about to move into our new office in London. I was thinking, I think on Fridays I might have AI lunches or something, and just sit and talk about it, because you can't lecture on it either. So I think we're going to have to think about how we bring a level of comfort to our organizations, whether they're hundreds of people or tens of thousands of people. How do we make them comfortable with AI so that they, A, are willing to embrace it and work with it, and B, are able to understand it enough to be the control of it, right? Because we talked earlier about the only control metric on AI is us, right? So we need to make sure we've got that under control, and that we know how to do it. They've got to know how they would manage an AI agentic tool. What is their involvement in that? And so I think reskilling the organization, even I would guess up to a leadership level, the leaders have to become comfortable too, right? And by nature, they're not the younger people in the organization. So it's a bigger change. So enabling leaders to be excited by AI and to want to embrace AI, to want to see a transformation this big in their business, right? I would go, wow, if I'm And I'm not. If I was running PepsiCo, I'd be going, this is so cool. I've got to reinvent all of PepsiCo. Yeah. And that would be exciting, but that isn't, some people are going to find that daunting, and then market share will change and all of those things. And they'll have to come in as the laggards rather than the frontiers. So I think just that enablement, and you don't see a lot of talk around that. In all honesty, you see more talk around the technology, around the threats, all of those things. And you don't hear enough about how am I going to enable my teams to feel comfortable in an AI world, and then to help us to be an organization that can be at the front of that, and comfortably at the front of that. And so, I think that's quite interesting. There was a guy on the news this morning and on the BBC, and he was he was upset because he'd been talking to he's been using AI to try and find a new job. I don't know if you saw it. He's been trying to find a new job, and he's been using the AI, and he's really guys. He's the same age as my son. He's in his late teens, and he kept giving it more and more information and training it. And eventually it kept coming back wanting to know more and taking him on a journey. It decided his life should be made into a film and a documentary, and that he should be a millionaire. And he was just so upset because he'd followed this whole track and then realized that actually it wasn't making any sense anymore. At what point did it lose the plot? And he said, I'm not blaming the AI, but because it occasionally came in and said, "Are you sure?" But it was really playing into his insecurities, and he felt like he'd been cheated by AI. And I could kind of see his point, because unless somebody tells you you need guardrails here, you need some parameters that say that far but no further, or how do I, we've got to train everybody to prompt, right? And everybody is going to need to be able to prompt. How do we make sure that everybody is equipped at the right level in these organizations, in all of our organizations, to be comfortable in this new world? So I would say that's the thing. I think get the go-to-market right, even if that means a restructure. Rethink your marketing, rewire it for revenue so that it maps straight over. Get your tech stack right, especially with intent tools that can manage how people are changing their buyer behaviors, because that's really important. And then upskill your whole team. That's your responsibility. The EU says legally it's your responsibility, I think. I think it's morally your responsibility. And then remember things like fairness, because there is nothing ED&I about AI. And it learns most of what it learns in a world that's not particularly unbiased or unfair. So we need to be the custodians of what's good. And that's important too. And so our control and our involvement, we're going to have to train our whole workforce to know how to handle AI, then how to step in and how to help AI to be the good answer it can be, the right answer it can be.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's lots of listeners now that are either already starting this or want to take tiny steps to get going or go all in. And you talked about business and applying guardrails to some of this stuff. You need to maintain the trust and accountability when you're putting this stuff in place. Any recommendations around that?
I think trust, it's going to be about putting the guardrails in. It's going to be about being really, really clear about how you're going to hold people accountable, and holding the AI accountable at the same time. I think these are the things that are coming out of kind of these new go-to-market strategies. Are where's the accountability in that? I think we've just become more accountable in this whole process. I think that's, you've got to look at the trust, and you've got to look at the authenticity, and you've got to bake that in your guardrails. So you've got to say, around each of these use cases, and within, wherever we're deploying it in the organization, we have understood what guardrails we need. We have understood how we create trust, how we create authenticity, and authenticity, and also fairness. I think fairness is a word I hear more now, which is a really nice word, because I think it kind of says, if we don't manage now how this is deployed, think of that poor guy on the news this morning. If we don't manage it, we create disappointment and distrust. So it sits with us as the people embedding AI and strategizing around how AI impacts marketing and sales, it pivots around us making sure we've put all of the protection in that we can, that we have truly understood the relationship between AI and human, and then and then human AI, agentic AI, and then human and multiple teams of agents. So all of that is going to kind of mean we have to build in processes that ensure we've allowed trust to exist in that environment. Trust is
Yeah.
always easily lost and hard to win.
Absolutely. And this is all brilliant insight for anyone listening. I just wonder if you've got an example of a company that has successfully embraced some of this change imperative, and what sort of results they've achieved.
Yeah, we're working with a couple now. I mean, it is really early to, as you know, with the deployment of agentic, it's still in its really early days. And I wouldn't want to name any of them specifically, but we certainly have a number of fairly significant clients that are looking to remodel two things. They're either remodeling, we've got a couple that are remodeling their go-to-market worldwide, and that means restructuring how sales and marketing. Now that's a consulting. That's a little over, over my pay grade. But we have, Marketbridge people in there actually planning how those organizations will structure and how AI will allow that structure to exist. So it's complete restructures based on AI. And I think there's two or three. They are all the bigger organizations, because I think they have the people to do it. I think this is where they have the people to be thinking about AI. So we have some of those, and I have other clients that are actually, I've got a couple that are looking at how to roll agentic AI out in their organization. And I think that's kind of a really cool exercise. I really love it. And so there are some, and of course we work together in partnership, you and I, and we've got those clients that are really beginning to benefit from the buyer group and the buyer group approach and the agentic AI solutions. So I think it's early. I think you'd probably say the same. We've got a couple of really nice cases where they're really starting to see some change, from how they engage buyers, and they're rewriting the funnel. It's immense.
Yeah, lots of change going on, and I'm conscious we're coming up on time, and we've only scratched the surface. So there is 100% an opportunity to have a follow up session on
I
this. But
love that.
couple of bits for the audience, really, because you sound like someone who consumes lots of content. Are there any books, blogs, newsletters, podcasts, or anything that you'd recommend the listeners
Oh,
look out for?
it's interesting. I really like listening to Stephen Bartlett. I do, because I find him really interesting. But I either managed to scare myself to death. So I was listening to one by the Godfather of AI, which is really terrifying. And I actually didn't finish that one because I found it just a little bit. I was quite scared by the end of it. But I was listening to one of his yesterday, which was about how they think AI is now going to cause Alzheimer's. And I was like, oh no, proper neuroscientists saying we're stopping using parts of our brain, which ultimately is going to lead to, if you don't use it, lose it. And so I love Stephen Bartlett because I think he's just really cool. And I think I like the range of topics he covers. I mean, there's plenty I watch, kind of women of my age and all that sort of stuff, Mel Robbins and all that sort of thing. But I would say in terms of staying ahead on kind of big topics and not just tech topics, I like Stephen Bartlett. I think he's cool, and he's probably one of my favorites. I would honestly say, what's the biggest impact on my life? Ted Lasso and Apple TV. So being a little bit more human, I think I live my life according to the world's ethics from Ted Lasso, if anybody watches that. So I'd listen to Stephen Bartlett, I'd watch Ted Lasso.
Awesome, good recommendations. Yeah, and I love Ted Lasso myself as well. So
Oh, waiting for the next season.
yeah, I can't wait for that. So you've been an awesome guest. So this is a
Thank
cheeky
you.
ask now. Do you have any other inspirational people you think that
Oh,
we should try and bring on to future episodes?
man. I tell you what, there are a couple of people. I mean, like you and I, we could talk about this forever, right? It's interesting. And there is a particular client I think I could talk about transformation with, and I do think this is transformation. And that's Kate Mackey, and she's one of our clients from EY. She's just written a book on B2B marketing, and it's being incorporated into an MBA. I think she's extraordinary, and yeah, I think she'd make an awesome guest, because I just think I could sit and talk about life, because this is not just about AI. It's about business. It's about life. It's about the organizations we care about. I would have said her. And the other one that I could also chat forever with is Joel Harrison, because Joel is just the god. Where there's the godfather of AI, he's probably the godfather of B2B. And yeah, no, I'd put Joel. I'd give you Joel and Kate Mackey, because I think they'd make awesome guests. I don't know if they've been on, but I think I haven't seen anything.
No, I know Joe well. We'll have to try and get him on, and
I think so.
I'll make an effort to get Kate to come on one as well. They're good
I think
recommendations.
she'd be incredible. I think she would. And Joel, I'd listen to all day long. So I'd definitely give you those two.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I reckon you've opened up lots of questions from people listening. Are you happy for people to get in touch with you after
Oh,
this podcast? And what's the best way?
massively. I think the truth for our industry is the more we connect and the more we do this together, the more we talk and share, the better this will be. Reach me on LinkedIn, Fiona Shepherd. You can find me through Fiona Shepherd at Marketbridge. I'd love to talk to anybody. And I experiences. I'd love to hear people's experiences, share their experiences, and you know, be part of this next wave. It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And Fiona, you've been an absolutely great
Thank
guest today.
you.
What a really interesting session. As I say, there's plenty more to come on this, I'm sure. So we'll get to the end of that. But for now, thank you for your time. I hope the
Lovely.
listeners have enjoyed this session. Don't forget, there's nearly 600 other episodes in the series, so make sure you check them out. And for now, thanks, Fiona. Thanks everyone for listening. And until the next time, cheerio.